Greetings, everybody. This is the Still Growing Podcast. And man, I have so much I want to share. And that's why I have to make sure I have some notes because I can talk about a whole bunch of things in a very short amount of time, right? I call it being a macro-associative thinker, right? So that's going to be the term for today. Macro-associative thinker, right? Just to give you a preview, right? Today, what we're going to talk about specifically is infrastructure gap, right? Wealth gaps, the gap between people in our community, the gap between people within our nation, and looking beyond just hustling, surviving, um, and remaining subsidized for some of us who are not hustle oriented. I will actually like to start there, to be honest, because I don't agree with us all being hustler oriented, right? I grew up so-called a hustler, right? Being of the hustle. I'm sure I still carry traits or components of that to this day. But I like to believe that I've done enough work to shift my mindset into being abundant, rooted, well managed, good steward, um, at peace, grounded, aligned, right? Just words that describe someone who has direction, is in their lane, growth oriented, healthy, sustainable, right? And I wrote about this subject in an article called The Infrastructure Gap Beyond the Hustle and the Handout, right? The subtitle is My Insight on Black Business from the Personal Experience and Observation Through the Event Venue Perspective. Okay. And the reason why I wrote this was because, to be completely honest, a few months ago, man, around March-ish, I would say in March, I was starting to see a pattern develop that, to be completely honest, I wasn't super proud to write about explicitly. It wasn't something I wanted to write about too loudly because it involved people that I love. It involved businesses that I frequent at. It involved a lot of my studies online. It involved things that I cared about, to make it plain and simple. So I wanted to be as light as I could on this subject, but I felt so passionate about it. I found myself explaining it over and over into what I felt like was a void. That's what usually prompts a lot of these writings, is anything that I found myself talking to people about countlessly that didn't resonate, that doesn't resonate, or isn't being talked about collectively. I'm like, all right, well, let me leave my notes, right? Let me leave this in an archive where I can document when this perspective, this idea, this thesis comes to me. And the reason I'm explaining this in such great detail is because I'm very intentional. I'm very meticulous. I'm very strategic. And what I've struggled with in communicating with others is comprehension. Oftentimes, well, let me take a step back. When I was younger, I lived in an environment where me and my friends needed one another to survive and elevate. So talking to one another intimately, talking to one another even sometimes disrespectfully, right? If we can use that as a spectrum. On one side, we have intimacy, and on the other side, we have disrespect and everything in between, right? We had the ability to communicate with one another, but the comprehension skills of what we would communicate were exceptional. I'm sure that was due to the fact that we knew each other's mothers and parents and day-to-day routine and struggles and strengths, right? And it created a spectrum, a palette of opportunities and also tools that we could use to construct, right, the communication styles, but also More importantly, we had repetitions. We had practice to learn how to comprehend one another, and we didn't think about leaving one another, ghosting one another, cutting each other off, creating boundaries. All of the talking points of today. And so I feel extremely fortunate. I feel extremely grateful, right? I feel exceptional in my relationships growing up early, even considering that they were in the streets due to poverty and not having access to adequate resources, safety, supervision, presence, guidance, right? There was a silver lining in all of it. And I've learned to recognize that silver lining in my entire life since I was young. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was my own personal experience, because I want to start off by saying that I love Black people down to my bones. I was watching a speech by Kwame Ture yesterday, and he was talking about how he loves Black people so much more than he even loves living, right? He wants to see us be liberated so badly. And I'm paraphrasing. I'm very much paraphrasing. That us as Black people being liberated is more important than him living a life of subjugation, right? I felt that very strongly, that if I have to live a life of subjugation, I'd rather spend my life and even use it as a tool to get us liberated before I just live subjugated. I don't like, number one, seeing my people be oppressed, and number two, I don't like being oppressed. But I guess as far as importance, I like to say that I don't want to be oppressed myself. I have to work on um, showing up for me and ensuring that my life has its sustainability, if you will, right? It has its value and its ability to serve me. But I struggle with that, just due to the fact that the majority of people who look like me are under subjugation. Excuse me, I'm sorry. So unprofessional. The podcasters would be looking at me like, this guy doesn't know how to record. You don't got some water? And I'm joking. So, but one thing I cannot stand, no matter if you're Black, white, woman, man, is poor business. And when I say poor business, I don't mean performance and margins and metrics and things like that. I'm talking about character, values, and ethics, right? And a lot of the spaces that I was born in um, were steeped in capitalism and colonialism, right? I remember when I realized that, when I learned allegedly that the federal, no, it's not allegedly, this is proven. You can go look this up. I actually looked it up. I've watched several documentaries about it, right? It's not a secret anymore that the federal government put drugs in our neighborhood, um, planted agents and informants who dealt drugs in our community. There's even cases, if you look it up, in Chicago, where they've left entire boxes of firearms in back alleys for people to find, right? So we know that the FBI and the CIA have infiltrated our community and solicited and provided violent, like, tools, apparatuses, guns, and drugs to our community, right? So when I went to my friends to explain this to them, that, yeah, man, like, every zip code is redlined, as far as banks and homes, like, you can't get loans, and they put the drugs here, and it used to not be this way. And we are a part of, pretty much, like a terrarium. We are being placed in this environment to either kill each other or be put in jail. Right. And I remember when I explained this to my friends after watching some documentaries on the internet, and um, it it didn't go as well as one would imagine. Right. It did not go as well as one would imagine. Um, they did not receive that information as urgent or pertinent. Okay. Uh, we continue to be in the streets. So I'd like to continue, right? Let's move on. I am not a black capitalist. I want to say this very clearly and very loud and proudly, right? Because once I realized what the system was, I immediately withdrew from it. I have not been practicing full blown cooperative and compliant social norms since I was about 18 years old. I'm 33 now. So it's been a while for me, just reconstructing my life. Let's go down the list of things I had to unlearn, right, before I could be who I was today, right? I had to unlearn self-hate and anti-blackness, right? Looking at myself and looking at my people as degenerate or self-harmful, along with a lot of other very harmful narratives. I had to take a lot of time to unlearn that. I'm still unlearning these things. I'm currently on my path of deconstructing patriarchy in my life. And honestly, in my life, I can't control anybody else, but just being a man and a black man that is being burdened with the idea of providing for everyone else, and um, also being a tyrant. No, I myself was never a tyrant, but I think that kind of goes into the latter of things that, okay, well, once you provide for your family, then it's like you need to control your environment and the people in it in order to maintain power and authority, right? But let's go back to the beginning, right? That from the anti-blackness to the poor eating habits, I had to reconstruct poor eating habits. I remember when my parents, more explicitly, my dad, he moved to North Carolina when I was about 18, maybe 19. So I had to live in Virginia, completely on my own. I had to figure out where I was going to live, where I was going to work, how I was going to provide for myself without any backbone, safety net, or support system. And so I had to reconstruct my eating habits. I remember I used to write about this when I started writing that I would have a honey bun for breakfast and a bag of lunch. I mean, a bag of chips for lunch, right? Because that was just a really cheap meal, and I had to stretch every dollar that I had. And I worked at a Wendy's, so sometimes that would be I would whatever was left at the end of the night, I would take home and I would eat that, right? And that was terrible, right? As far as high health wise. Okay, so let's move. Let's keep moving on, right? I had to deconstruct being violent and hyper vigilant because in my neighborhood, ever since I was maybe about, 12 years old, I was exposed to gang violence. I was exposed to hypersexuality. I was I was surrounded in violence, verbally, emotionally, sexually. Um, Man, like as I'm reflecting, I just remember being extremely young and there just being countless fights and jumping is when more than one person fights someone else. I know we have some other people chiming in these days, so I just wanted to make sure I translate that. And yeah, man, so I'm gonna move on, man, because that's I could go on and on about all the things that I had to unlearn, man. I had to unlearn the way I looked at Africa, right? I had to unlearn that. I had to unlearn homophobia. I had to unlearn um, dogmatic Abrahamic religions and being petrified of going to hell and being a sinner, right? But let's move on, man. Let's move on because we got to deconstruct these, um, what we call paradigms, right? Ways of thinking, and you know, become more conscious, right? Just conscious meaning being in the interest and effort of humanity and uplifting it as we continue to live on this planet. So I'm someone who believes very much, and I know this is more than a belief. This is my truth. This is the truth to me, right? This is what is the truth. Our liberation lies in being unified, right? And our collective attack on systemic injustice and in true revolution, right? There's no way around this. And part of me stating that I'm not a black capitalist to begin this was because a lot of times people think being a capitalist is basic business, right? Whether it's being in white corporate greed or being in the streets, right? Whether it's the what I call the corporate plantation of today, right? Go to college, get a lot of debt, get a mortgage, get a lot of debt, get a car, get a lot of debt, right? This sounds like I'm singing a song. And then work the rest of your life paying back interest and loans. Um, so, you know, a lot of what my logic or my intro to the world was drug dealing, while also being raised in a basic functional home until about 8 years old, until I got divorced, and then that's what everything I mentioned to you I was exposed to. But I would say till about 8 years old I was in a pretty functional home, 2 parent household, bills paid, holidays, nice, food and TV and clothes, and I had my little swimming classes. I still don't know how to swim to this day. I went to a couple camps or whatever, but things were pretty cool, man. So I've gotten to at least experience that very briefly. And so, what does this have to do with infrastructure gaps, right? Well, obviously, it has to do with my personal experience and experiencing different forms of living in America, right? Experiencing what today they would call Black excellence, right? 2 parents making a steady wage, military, and all of that. Very exceptional amongst their peers, and oftentimes regarded as the good Black people. Okay. And then I've also been on the other side of the tracks where I've, been completely homeless, been impoverished, been exposed to uh, poverty, right, of others very frequently. And so that's what helps me see the world in many layers. And like I was mentioning earlier, through a spectrum. And so let's fast forward to today, right? I'm in Philadelphia. I've been living here for about going on 9 years now. And I'll honestly say, man, this has been one of the most transformative experiences in my mind. I feel like Frederick Douglass, right? When he left uh, the the DMV area, as we would call it today, right? He left that area to come north, get free, and started working on his voice, his scholarship, and whatnot. And man, Philadelphia has been super instrumental to helping me understand a world outside of the world I grew up in. Understanding history from a different lens, because getting to see almost 2 different worlds, seeing the world that the South built, right, a Southern lifestyle, and then seeing what they called the North or the Union around Civil War times, right, and just seeing how infrastructurally different a city is from a rural area, and seeing the difference between the both of them from being in England in a suburban area, right? Because I was born in England, for those of you who don't know, on a military base. I am British. But one thing that stuck out to me when I transitioned into a legitimate business practice is how much people throw away their values, their morals, their ethics, and their integrity because they're making money legally, right? So it's almost like when you're in the streets, you have these honor codes and these street codes and these morals and these values that you're willing to die for. You're willing to die for your respect. You're willing to die for your family. You're willing to sell drugs to provide for them, even if you lose your freedom. Like, it's a very martyrdom experience. It's very rooted in uh, wanting to earn some kind of humanity. And then I feel like I even feel like I witness a lot of people who have a job and a day-to-day living. I mean, they'll from things as basic as traffic violations, right? They don't have no moral guilt or implication of these things, whether it's um, you know fighting for late payments. That was always something interesting that I saw, because when you're in the streets, you can't have a lot of late payments, just to say the least. Can't be running around with late payments. It's not safe. But people with jobs, man, they fight to pay things late. Like it's they're entitled to it. It's very interesting. Um, and at the very least, like, seeing how many times a corporation can steal money, steal data, harm people, and then people still sign right back up. I guess that's like one of the I guess at the top of the food chain. It's like, man, so many businesses can do so much wrong. They can poison your water. They can build pipelines through your neighborhood. They can be racist. They can steal your data, right? They can use products that actually harm people, and people still just sign back up, man. It's like daily practice watching a corporation do something wrong. And so this year, we celebrate. I don't celebrate, but America is celebrating its 250th anniversary. And I've been saying this recently, right? It's celebrating it by bringing Philadelphia to the FIFA World Cup, which I don't have a clue still what soccer has to do with the 250th year anniversary of America. I do not understand it. I don't know what it has to do with anything. But in this article I wrote, I was looking at the horizon. I was looking at the schedules and etc. I was looking at the Wawa Fests, and I was looking at the FIFA World Cup and the 250th anniversary. And I realized that, a lot of the Black-owned businesses that I would frequent would talk about how they were going to capitalize on that opportunity by having memorabilia and merch and events and stuff like that. And I'm like, we're not prepared. I would say it in my mind. I'm like, throwing a quick after party or having pop-ups that capitalize on memorabilia and like, uh, you know, what are those things called? Just merchandise, for lack of a better word, right? That's not going to improve the consistency of our business. Like, that's not going to shift things for us. It would make me very frustrated, especially talking to older people with jobs who like literally work at corporations. It's like, man, doesn't this stuff come down the pipeline significantly earlier than this in order for y'all to make any meaningful approach to it? And I'm even saying, let's be honest, I'm sure your job doesn't even make a meaningful approach to a lot of the commercial efforts that it designates to you, right? Whether it's cheap handouts and pamphlets and corny activities and cheap investments towards making a profit, man. I think we sometimes are very disillusioned. In reality, I looked at this as a really big issue. I'm like, y'all do realize that this is going to drain a lot of our community's resources. A lot of this capital and a lot of this infrastructure is going to go right over top of us, potentially right on top of us, right? I was very discouraged. I was very, very frightened. I'm like, man, like, this is going to dominate all of our grassroots, independent and privately coordinated and organized things. I mean, as little organization that we have, as I mentioned before, like, we're not extremely unified even in our own 0.5 mile radius, let alone, having some programs, initiatives, efforts, and means of unifying and showing up for one another long term. Like, I could go on and on and on. I was very, very confused. I'm like, man, why are we pretending like we have the resources to, make a meaningful effort towards this? Like, we should be insulating ourselves from this and curating a Black experience for not just the FIFA World Cup, but for Philadelphia and United States overall. Like, people should be coming to specific spaces and environments in Philadelphia to experience what's being Black, and we should be exporting that. We should be owning and exporting that daily. Like, that should be our day-to-day business, right? But of course, most people like to try to assimilate and try to integrate into American society without their Blackness. This goes back to what I mentioned in the beginning, man. Is like, this is learned behavior. Saying things like, oh, I don't want to call myself a Black-owned business because I don't want to turn anyone down, right? Or, oh, I don't want to organize with non-Black American people because they're not really Black. They're immigrants, right? The xenophobia and the homophobia. I'm not into all of those pronouns and all of that stuff, right? Transphobia, the phobia of our men, right? Oh, Black men are so violent and they're so illiterate and they're so dysfunctional. So I just was like, I know we are not going to try to make an effort to try to make money off this FIFA thing when we don't even have our own stuff together. It was very, very, very confusing and disheartening because it just showed a grift. It showed how much we're willing to practice this hustle, even to our own character uh, detriment, right? To the detriment of our character, man. So, um, even during my tenure having a studio, right, from 2019 to 2023, I always tried to outpace bad partnerships with hard work. That's something that I've worked on vigilantly, is not making bad partnerships. Because oftentimes it's our partnerships, it's our relationships with ourselves, obviously, but like our relationships to other people that are very shallow and very transactional, that don't ever lead us to have anything sustainable or meaningful to, own and so-called capitalize on. I don't like to say capitalize on, but just for the sake of language and simplicity, yeah, that's what we try to do. But let's say maximize, right? Try to maximize on our opportunities, maximize on our relationships, okay? And we disguise taking advantage of one another as business, whether it's not paying each other, whether it's paying each other to remove each other from the ownership table, or just simply competing. Secretive competitions, man. And we look for so much validation in groups outside of us, right? Like we'll let other groups of people get over on us hand over fist, as they would call it, just for crumbs or just validation or a quick paycheck, while our own groups just be starving. And you know, I looked at these corporations and these commercial efforts of the 250th anniversary as replacements, right? Anyone who is chosen, just like all of this, we have tokens, right? There's always tokens in these events where it's like, oh, we're going to prop up this pillar in your community. And by the time you look back in a few years, they've been extracted or replaced, oftentimes, or both. They're extracted, studied, observed, measured, and then replaced. And then, they come back, they drag themselves across the floor back into community to ask for, some kind of GoFundMe or some kind of resurgence because they trusted corporations to uplift them and put them on the TV screens and, subsidize them and sponsor them, only to find out that they were replacing them, right? And then within a few years, Black-led ideas are gone, right? And I see that now with vending experiences, events, open mics, showcases, right? Between the pandemic, social media, corporations, and artificial intelligence, grassroots movements have been shot in the kneecap. They have been shot in the foot, right? They are immobilized. And like I said, with my space, I take responsibility of that because oftentimes, due to my just need to survive, I adopted a lot of the city's hypervigilance. When I came here with bright eyes, and I thought all of the Black men and all the Black women and all the Black people were going to come together and work together, and we were going to build this kumbaya arc of the covenant and sail into our rightful places in America. And we just needed the idea and the leadership and the space to do so. Because I was so willing and cooperative with my friends back in the streets, because I was so willing and cooperative to find spaces that I could be safe in and be honored and be provided just a simple job, I'm thinking everyone who was like me or had that mindset would show up and we would all come together and make this thing work. And man, I learned very quickly that is not the case. It made me deepen my relationship with revolutionaries, right? And understanding that not everybody wants to be free. Sometimes we have agents inside of our community that are willing to and interested in selling us out. We have people that hate themselves and hate their people so much that they will sabotage these movements. We have people who are so afraid of oppression and our oppressor that they will not be a part of the movement because they're afraid of getting caught. So there's so many dynamics that I learned from owning my business as to why Black people are not unified and moving forward together. It's actually very, very sad. It's very sad. But one thing that I will take from Kwame Ture again is, as long as we continue the struggle, we never lose, right? And I know a lot of people don't like to hear that. Oftentimes people say things And I am guilty of allowing this to influence me at certain points where we say, well, I need to get some money before I can give back or before I can help. I need to get some money. I need to make sure that I'm straight. I got to provide for myself before I can be a part of the movement, before I can be a part of the collective. And this is part of what keeps us behind the eight ball, man. So I did a lot of talking here today about what I saw as the issue, right? I did a lot of talking about what I saw as the issue. But if we want to survive what is actually currently happening, right? I wrote that back in March, and it's now currently July 7th. We are in the heat. We are in the middle of all of what I wrote about. And man, it is literally what I said. There are no Black-owned spaces that are capitalizing on this very well. Shouts out to this African Fest that I saw in Southwest. I don't think they were too prioritized around the 250 thing. I think they just ran their play, and then they also just accentuated it with some 250 in America stuff. But shouts out to the Africans, man. They got a sense of unity, man. That's why I'm a Pan-Africanist. That's why I'm a Rasta, because I saw that and I seen that bridge that needs to be built from a long time ago, man. With African people's self-esteem and with African American Black people's self-confidence, man, if we can bridge that gap, because I feel like Black Americans lack a lot of self-esteem. We have a lot of self-confidence, but our self-esteem, man. But then you go to Africans and people of the diaspora globally, and they oftentimes lack the self-confidence, and they have so much self-esteem, right? So it's like we need to trade that with one another, right? These are part of the solutions. These are the things that I want to provide, is like we got to be more of humanitarians than profiteers, right? White supremacy has all of the wealth. It's already locked away, man. It's in stocks. It's in real estate. A large amount of the wealth in America is already capitalized on. There's no more hard work or education you can get to liberate us as a people through capitalism. It's already done. Everything has been capitalized on. All the natural resources have been taken. All the wealth has been extracted. It's done. It's already done, y'all. That's why they're in different countries doing the colonialism and the capitalism and the war, because it's already done here. We've already been conquered. This Black American, African American colony has been completed. We're just living in it now. We are just compliant. There's only revolution left. There's no participating and organizing to try to like topple it or something. Like artificial intelligence has all of the information that human history has ever experienced that's been documented, right? They have machines that iterate on this. If you've ever seen The Terminator, or if you've ever seen James Bond, Skynet, or if you've ever seen The Matrix, right? You cannot beat the system this way by just simply fighting against it any longer, right? You have to be extremely strategic, organized. You have to remove yourself from the system and then defend yourself from it. But trying to fight guns and missiles and artificial intelligence sounds like a sci-fi movie at this point, right? It's like ridiculous, right? And part of like what I said, I had to do a lot of relearning by myself. I had a lot of determination to do that. But we got to create learning centers for one another. Like we have to stop shaming artists and entrepreneurs for what they don't know, and just build spaces where they can grow and learn, but eventually pay one another to grow and learn. We need that. And continuity is more important than convenience, man, because what prompted this article was people's effort to try to capitalize conveniently on, what America says is the important thing to do. And then I'm looking to my left with the side eye, like, you don't even like being American unless I'm getting this all messed up, because you talk all of that anti-white supremacy stuff when you're around me. You talk all about how the system is messed up around me, but I'm starting to learn, man. People perform being pro-Black around me. People perform being revolutionaries around me. I'm starting to learn this. I've been learning this for the last few years, that when people leave my presence, this is the thing furthest from their mind, is what I'm talking about. So, and we got to stop racing to the bottom, because I watch people price things. Oh, I'm gonna do it for 20. I'll do it for 15. I'll do it for 10, or even in reverse. Oh, because they're doing it for 20, I'm gonna do it for 25. All right, I'm gonna do it for 30. Right? It's like we do a great job of ruining each other's offers. We do a great detriment to one another. I'm not saying that's more harmful than the system, but I do want to hold us accountable and saying, like, trying to get a quick flip or trying to compete with your brother is not the way to, I guess, returning back to the community and helping after, right? Like, listen to how this sounds. Like, we think that capitalizing, taking advantage of one another, seeking capital, and um, that's going to help, right? Us get to the top. Essentially, first we get to the top, we get to our own salvation, and then we turn back around and come back to help the community. That is a very backwards. It's a very backwards plan. So what we're experiencing here in America is fascism, where the corporations are in bed with the government, local, state, federal, the whole gambit, right? And they are in cahoots to take advantage of the people predominantly, all of us, right? The interest of corporations and the government shared against the interest of the people, taking advantage of them, especially in these arts and entertainment spaces. Those was the first places to be colonized because those are the places that have a large influence on the people. If we don't start organizing on an ethical and human-centric level, um, we're going to continue to be in this rat race, selling our souls to cover our leases, right? To cover the next 30 days, surviving in America. So with that being said, y'all, I will let you go. I hope you enjoyed this Still Growing podcast. Please subscribe because that's what pays the bills and grows the platform. Ashe.